Hello and welcome to another episode of a Brothers Creed podcast. We're talking about motivation, experiences, and exploring the world around us. We're the Thomas Brothers. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Jared, and today we're talking about an interesting topic. We're talking about animals today. Animals that do wonderful things, and then situations where animals have turned on their owners. There's history is rife. History and humans have had or animals and humans have had a very close relationship throughout all of history. Some animals can be domesticated, and others cannot. And so we're going to talk about some of these situations where animals have been so influential in helping humans, and then in some cases where they have not been that way. So excited to get into some of these crazy stories. Some of them heartwarming, and others shockingly disturbing. Some of these are kind of we're going to share the graphic details with you. So just a forewarning, if you are listening in the car with your kids, might want to skip to the end. Skip to the end. Skip to the good, just the positive stories, because some of these other stories are pretty wild.
Yeah. We'll do the when animals turn bad at the beginning, and then the second half we'll do the good portion.
That's right. All right, let's do it.
Okay.
Spartans! What is your profession?
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills that make me a nightmare.
If I can change, and you can change, everybody can change!
Let us all unite! Let us fight for a new world! A decent world!
All right. So, like Jared said, today we're going to be talking about animals. The relationship between man and beast has been a very beneficial thing throughout history, to a certain extent, but there has been some times where I would say man and beast have clashed. Some animals are domesticated or have the ability to become domesticated over time. We see that with dogs and cats and different things, pets around the home. That being said, there are some dog type animals that are not domesticated as well. And the story I'm going to start us out with is a famous story of some guys that work together that were in the habit of domesticating tigers. This isn't the Tiger King. Maybe this is the original Tiger King, right?
I'm never going to financially recover from this.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into it. And so some of these guys definitely...
The Tiger King wasn't in the habit of putting his head inside tigers' mouths, though, was he?
Yeah, so this is the story of Siegfried and Roy. Siegfried and Roy were a duo of German-American magicians and entertainers that were best known for their appearances with white lions and white tigers. They had a huge act in Vegas over the course of 50 years. This is a long time. Siegfried and Roy, they performed 30,000 shows to 50 million people and generated over $1 billion in ticket sales. So,
wow.
I mean, this was a pretty big deal. Their act fused kind of gigantic, mind-blowing illusions. They would make elephants disappear and all these different types of things, along with mixing in these exotic animals. They would have exotic animals like these white lions and tigers balancing on disco balls over the audience, right? I mean, they would do all these crazy things.
Oh wow!
And so in the through all the sparkles and explosions that happened during their shows at Vegas, they never really had any serious incidents. Obviously, they had trainers and they had different things, and nothing ever goes perfect. But I'm sure we all remember, or at least remember hearing about it, the infamous attack. So during one of their shows at the Mirage in Las Vegas, this was on Roy's birthday. His name was Roy Horn. And on Roy's birthday, it was October 3rd, 2003, a 7-year-old white tiger named Manticore attacked Roy. So this tiger, its name was Manticore. It was part of this act that they were doing, and Roy actually went a little bit off script, and he had a microphone in his hand, and Roy held the microphone out in front of Manticore, the tiger's mouth, and told him to say hello to the crowd. Well, they hadn't practiced this, and he was kind of going off script, and Manticore responded immediately by biting Horns or the Roy's sleeve. So it bit Roy's sleeve, and he started to swat the tiger and to yell, release, release, which is what their cues were for, whenever they needed to release, to let go. And there was a bunch of trainers that are kind of in the wings of the stage that are there, in case of emergencies or whatever else. Well, they tried to distract Manticore, this tiger. They tried to distract him with cubes of meat, with toys, with balls, with all different kind of stuff, trying to, as Roy was kind of pulling back and forth with.
Did it bite his arm or just his sleeve?
At this point, it was just his sleeve, they said. So Roy actually started pulling back and kind of trying to rip away, and that's when he grabbed onto his arm. And they say that it was instinctual for the tiger, as Roy was pulling away, for the tiger to
readjust,
basically pull him in tighter. And so he readjusted and he started pulling him in, and the tiger actually leapt at him, onto him. And as the tiger leapt onto him, Roy was standing there, and as the tiger leapt, he swept Roy's legs with one of his big paws, swept his legs as he leapt at him. And so it was like a sweep of the legs and then landed on top of him. And all of the trainers rushed in, and they were trying to pull him off of Roy, but Manticore ended up biting him right on his neck and dragged him off stage as all these people were trying to get him separated.
No way.
And
wow.
so he drags him off stage, and the trainers were finally able to get him to let go by spraying him with a fire extinguisher. That's the only way that they were able to to make the tiger let go. Sprayed him with the fire extinguisher.
Yeah.
So in the attack, it severed Roy's spine. So the bite to the neck, from the
that was a kill bite. That was a kill bite.
Oh yeah, for sure. So
he was going to drag him up. He would have dragged him up a tree if there would have been a tree nearby.
Oh yeah. This resulted in massive blood loss. And he was severely injured to several other areas of his body as well. This permanently impaired his motor and verbal abilities for the rest of his life. So he didn't die.
Oh, he did. Yeah.
He didn't die. So during, as they were rushed him to the hospital and everything else, the doctors said that sometime either during or right after the tiger drug him off stage, he had a stroke while the tiger was mauling him as well.
Oh, because of just the heightened situation.
I don't know if it was just the stress or something got knocked loose or whatever else it might have been, but he had a stroke at the same time all this was going on.
Jeez.
And I mean, that could have been due to having your
maybe the tiger sensed that. Maybe the tiger could sense that.
Yeah, and so it was interesting. So while he was taken to the hospital, Roy, while he was in the ambulance going to the hospital, he was quoted saying, "Manticore is a great cat. Make sure that no harm comes to Manticore." And so he, specifically said, "Don't hurt the cats. Don't hurt the cat." Um, and then in 2004, so a year later, um, he said that Manticore actually saved his life by trying to drag him to safety after he had a stroke. So Roy said that, I had a stroke while I was interacting with the lion or with the tiger, and that's when he grabbed me and tried to drag me to safety because he sensed that I was having a stroke. I don't know.
It sounds like he's trying to protect a legacy, where he's got some other guy in there. Maybe it's not Siegfried and Roy, it's Siegfried and trainer number 2, where they've got this legacy royalty thing going on and they don't want to get canceled or something.
So the lead trainer, his name was Chris Lawrence. He later contradicted that theory, Roy's theory, and said that it was due to how Roy mishandled Manticore off and on the stage. And, I don't think there's any doubt out there that these guys loved these tigers that they worked with and lions that they worked with.
Yeah.
I mean, they created whole lives around them. But still, I mean, pets are kind of like lifelong babies that don't do what you ask them to do all the time.
Yeah.
So it can be frustrating. So, really interesting. This same trainer stated that he had there had kind of long since been problems with the trainers and Siegfried and Roy as well, and they were kind of arguing up to this point, and that there was he claimed that there was a massive cover up by the Mirage and the Siegfried and Roy, and saying that it wasn't the Tiger's fault, it was he was trying to save me and everything else. So the aftermath of this was they didn't put down the tiger. They performed. Siegfried obviously he continued to kind of do some things, and Roy, he recovered to a certain extent, but he was very immobile. I mean, he had very little range of motion. He could walk, but it was very labored, and he did not. He wasn't able to speak.
Oh man.
And so they performed little shows and some charity things here and there after that, but it really kind of fell off the face of the earth. They kind of did a TV show that was called Father of the Pride, and they kind of got into that a little bit. But on March 19th of 2014, Manticore, the tiger, died of a brief illness, they said, at 17 years old. So I don't know, they didn't say what illness it was. That being said,
Roy still alive?
So that happened in 2003 is when the attack happened.
Yeah.
Roy died on April 28th, 2020, after testing positive for COVID-19.
Well, everybody was testing positive, so it was probably a coronavirus death.
Yeah, so they say that because of all of the pre-existing conditions and problems that he had physically, when he got COVID-19, his body just was not able to fight off and recover. So he ended up dying during the kind of the pandemic.
Dang.
Siegfried, and he was 75 years old when he died. Siegfried died on January 11th, 2021, after a fight with terminal pancreatic cancer. So he died at age 81 in 2021.
He got off easy, man. He didn't have to get mauled by a tiger.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. He probably would have preferred to get mauled by a tiger
going through
than
cancer,
pancreatic cancer.
Jeez. Man, wow. That's
Yeah, it was just kind of crazy. I didn't know that they lived that long. I mean, these guys were pretty old. They were mid 70s and early 80s. Like, I mean, they did this for a long time.
That's wild. Yeah, that's I had heard about them. I had thought that they did like an act where they opened the tiger's mouth and they put their head in the tiger's mouth. Kind of was like, oh, look at this. And for some reason, I had thought that the tiger had chomped down on his head. But he would obviously be dead quickly if that had happened. But
yeah, now you're thinking of some alligator show in Louisiana,
yeah, some backwoods.
or in Cambodia or something. I mean, I'm sure they might have done stuff like that. I don't know, but that wasn't the specific case on when the attack happened.
So this one that I'm going to share is pretty nuts. First of all, I saw this movie called Nope. You heard that movie?
I heard of it. Yeah.
So it's like I think it's a Jordan Peele movie, and it's kind of crazy. Like part of the movie is like there was like this sitcom, and they had this chimp on the sitcom, and one day they were doing like an episode, like a birthday party episode for the chimp, and then it was like in front of a live audience, and there was like a bunch of balloons or something that started popping under the lamps, like the lighting, and like really freaked the chimp out, and the chimp like just lost it and like killed somebody, and then like went haywire on another lady, and that's just, so that's like part of the movie. It doesn't show anything, but like one of the main characters in the movie is who was a kid on that show, and then he later in his life he like creates like a little old western town kind of a thing. It's kind of weird, but this reminded me of that. So there's this chimp. His name was Travis, but I'll just call him Chimp. And he was a beloved animal actor and also a local fixture in his Connecticut town. And then that was until he attacked this lady in 2009. So the incident, just kind of a little bit of background for the incident here. So the chimp was born in a sanctuary in 1995. He was taken from his mother at 3 days old, so pretty early, and was sold to Sandra and Jerome Harold for $50,000. That's a lot. Maybe it's not a lot. I don't know. I don't know the animal used animal market very well. Actually, it wouldn't be that used of an animal. Pretty new. The chimp was raised alongside humans because Harold and Sandra, or Sandra and Jerome Harold had their own child. The chimp would eventually dress himself, did chores, ate meals. They say he, quote, used a computer, close quote. He knew the times when the ice cream truck would come by. And so he was supposedly liked baseball. So they viewed him almost as like a member of the family, ate at the dinner table with everybody. A lot of stuff started happening with this family, though. Like in 2000, when the chimp was 5 years old, the Harolds one of their children, their only child, died in a car accident, and that was really devastating. And then 4 years after that, Jerome, the father, died from cancer, so leaving just Sandra Harold and the chimp. And in 2003, he began to have kind of fits of erratic behavior. He would get out and run around, and one time someone threw some trash at him through a window, it said, and he got out and ran around. They had to go find him and get him back and stuff. And so they had some lifelong friends.
Monkeypox.
Yeah. So they had some lifelong friends. So this lady her name was Charla Nash. She was a lifelong friend of the Harolds. And obviously she had been through them when they lost their child, when Jerome died and all this kind of stuff. So she came over to visit the Harolds' house, where it was just Sandra and the chimp. And she was just visiting with them. So the chimp started acting really erratic. He started, he grabbed Sandra, Harold's, his keeper, her keys, and like ran out of the house. And Miss Nash, she was just there as a friend. So she was just trying to help. And they were like trying to bait come here, because the chimp had gotten out, I think in the front yard. It got outside. It was just right outside the house. And they were like, come here, come here. They were trying to bait it back in with a Tickle Me Elmo doll. And they, Chimp is his favorite toy. He didn't like it at all. And see, the thing is that Miss Nash had recently gotten a short haircut. And so they think that maybe he didn't recognize her, that he had seen her quite often before. Maybe he thought that she was a stranger trying to steal his favorite toy or something like that. But regardless, the Chimp went after her and savagely attacked her. The Chimp, basically, they had this tussle in the front yard or right outside the door. It was outside. The Chimp tore away her eyelids, her lips, most of her scalp, her jaw off, her nose off. And while all this is happening, the owner, Sandra Harold, is like hitting the Chimp with the shovel. She's trying to get it stopped. Just stop. And then it's not doing anything. It's absolutely attacking her best friend, basically pounding her face in. So she takes a knife and she starts stabbing him in the back. Sandra had said, quote, "For me to do something like that, put a knife in him, was like putting one in myself." Close quote. So it was really hard for her to do that because this was like her only living child almost. Like she felt like that, really her only living loved one. Well, I couldn't say that because she may have extended family, but of her immediate family, her husband died and her other child died. And so she calls 911 immediately. The 911 and the ambulance comes, but like from what I could tell, the ambulance maybe got there first, but they didn't get out because the Chimp was still like running around the front yard. And they waited for the police to get there, and then when the police car got there, the Chimp like ran around, went up to the police car and tried to open up all the doors, and the police officer was like, "What is going on?" And this thing's gone, like just enraged, trying to open up all the doors in the police car, and then he finds one that's open. He rips it open, breaks the window as he's opening it. Police steps out of the car, shoots the Chimp several times, and then Chimp runs inside into its cage and dies, basically. And so what
that's crazy.
Crazy experience, right? The fallout from this was pretty nuts. So Miss Nash, she survived, and they were able to reattach her jaw. You just think about like your face, like any loose thing on your face. Just imagine somebody grabbing that and just tearing it, just tearing it off, or your ears, or your hair. It's crazy. That's what happened. So they reattached her jaw, and she was one of the ones that was given one of those experimental full facial transplants, and it was, fairly successful, I guess. It wasn't rejected totally. I guess, what when you think about like, is a full facial transplant successful or is it not successful? You can tell that something has obviously happened. Some type of traumatic thing has obviously happened to her. And I don't know what she looked like after she got mauled by this Chimp, but it looks like the skin took. So there's that. It looks like she's probably blind. It didn't say that she was specifically blind, or it didn't say anything about her eyes specifically, but it is my impression from my research that she is blind in both of her eyes. And she ended up suing her former friend now for $50 million. They eventually settled it for $4 million, which is probably just enough to cover the medical bills. Can you imagine getting a full experimental face transplant? I imagine that was millions of dollars on its own. Actually,
no, I can't.
Yeah. I just have had a baby and they charged me, and the bill's like $50,000, So I can't imagine doing something like so extreme like that and all that recovery. Apparently the Chimp, they did a study on its brain or something, and they found that the Chimp was on Xanax during that time for anxiety or something. Apparently Xanax is known to cause some hallucinations in humans. So they don't know if that was what was going on. They don't know if it was because of her short hair. They don't know. One interesting piece that I did not expect out of this was that the police officer who actually shot the chimp, he was pretty messed up, like mentally, from this whole thing. Probably from seeing what happened to this lady, and then having to shoot the chimp. And so it actually kind of brought more attention to mental health for police officers. And then it also really brought a lot of change, people trying to make change with lawmakers to reconsider like the domestication of exotic animals over 50 pounds. Because, these animals, who knows? The thing is that what I found interesting is that a chimpanzee, if it's with another chimp, if it's with the same species, oftentimes these things fight and then they fight back and they're tough enough to take it within their own species. Like if I'm fighting another guy and we're punching each other and we're like biting each other or whatever, it's unlikely that one of us is going to kill each other or at least like way overpower someone else. I mean, unless you're going against
it's unlikely
the
you're
mountain
gonna
or
rip
something.
Somebody's jaw off.
Yeah, unless you're going against someone who's absolutely, totally just beast. Like the mountain, you get your head just crushed in.
Yeah.
But that's what I think is really dangerous about these cross species things. Like a tiger, biting your arm that's a big deal. Whereas if a tiger is biting another tiger, maybe it's not that big of a deal. Because they're used to that. They're also tough. So when you have these big animals that are over 50 pounds, you've got, and chimps are really strong, man. They just, they have no sense of decency or morals or anything. They're just like, oh, who's this stranger with my tickle me Elmo? You're done, and so that was a pretty crazy story.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to teach a wild animal really to restrain itself.
And the wild animal itself is like a weapon because they have claws or they have teeth or their strength is so much to where they could just pound you into, powder, basically.
Yeah. Well, I think chimps have pretty large like canine teeth as well.
Yeah, they can.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate. But
wild.
Yeah,
well,
wild.
I think the both. Well, we've got two more stories. So you share your next story, then I'll share.
Yeah. So but this next one is kind of a short one. It actually talks about an animal that we had grown up for a very short period of time.
Oh yeah.
So this is about a ferret. So a ferret is a little kind of, I don't know, rat-looking creature that's not,
a long rat.
Yeah, that's kind of long and furry. It doesn't really have like the face of a rat or it's kind of more like a furry, long animal. But and we had one as kids for a while.
Yeah.
But we ended up having to take it back because people were allergic to it, and it was just kind of a big thing. But they're very cute. But one thing I think people don't realize with them, and I don't particularly remember it from whenever we had one, but from the stories that I've read, is that these ferrets are they're carnivorous creatures. They have very sharp, kind of piranha-like teeth that they use to catch mice and other animals and other rodents and different things. So that, I mean, they're hunters.
Mm-hmm.
There was a Missouri family that had two ferrets as pets, and they would just let them roam the house, willy-nilly, and they were domesticated, quote unquote. And then one night they woke up and they had a newborn baby that was, maybe 3 or so months old. And they woke up at night, they heard the baby crying. And so they were kind of like, oh, okay, and they went into the baby's room expecting that, to need to change a diaper or whatever else. Well, when they went into the room, the ferrets had gotten into the crib with the baby and had eaten several of the baby's fingers.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so they, rushed the baby to the hospital and the best they could, but I mean, there's no retrieving eaten fingers. And it was just something that was just like so crazy that you wouldn't even think of, but they're just these little feral creatures that are running around. And if they see little things that look like worms or whatever else, then I mean, they're nocturnal creatures anyway.
Yeah.
And you come up against a baby who is absolutely defenseless and can't even have the muscle control to swat something away. Is pretty that's pretty gruesome. So
Oh man.
I can't.
I can't imagine. Did they execute those things on the spot?
It didn't say, but
I don't think I would be able to control myself to not do that if that was happening.
Yeah. So that's a crazy little story that
Jeez, man,
that I read a news article on.
Terrifying.
So.
Especially you think ferrets, but you gotta be so careful with babies, man.
Yeah.
You'd be real careful with babies. But
I was gonna say, I think sometimes too, and I've always been curious. I've never really had kind of dogs and stuff, but I see some parents that they have their 150-pound huskies or German shepherds or whatever, that they let them sleep with their kind of infant childs, and I'm like, oh man, that thing just rolls over or something. It's gonna lay on top of your kid and smother your kid. Like, oh, he would never do that. Yeah, well, that lady probably thought that chimp would never go complete ape on somebody and just rip somebody's jaw off either.
Yeah,
when they were sitting at the dinner table sharing macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't have ever thought that ferrets would be savage like that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So my other story is, this is something that most people will likely not encounter, but this one is about Humphrey the hippo. So Humphrey the hippo, he was obviously hippopotamus, and there was a farmer in South Africa named Maurice Els, 40-year-old retired army major. He rescued Maurice, he rescued the hippo, and he had a 400-acre farm. He rescued the hippo from a flood when it was a baby, and then he added to his farm where he also had giraffes and rhinos and this kind of stuff. He was trying to domesticate these kind of animals. One of some of the things he had done, like a YouTube video or news. There's a YouTube video with him, a news story where they kind of talked to him about stuff, and so he's quoted saying a variety of things. He said, "Quote: They think you can only have a relationship with dogs, cats, and domestic animals, but I have a relationship with the most dangerous animal in Africa." Close quote. He also said an animal would come when he would call it, and he's called it a lovable and gentle giant. He had taught the hippo to swim alongside humans, as it was growing up, and he would literally ride it like a horse. Like in the video, he's riding on its back. And it kind of tosses him off at one point. The hippo was 5 years old when he was photographed riding its back. He said, quote, "Humphrey's like a son to me. He's just like a human," he said. "There's a relationship between me and Humphreys, and that's what some people don't understand." So he was very tight with this, trusting this giant animal that was 1.2 tons. So anyway, Maurice's wife had her misgivings about this, especially after it got loose and chased a boy and the boy's grandfather, who were on a golf course, or actually they were on a canoe trip. They got chased up a tree, and they spent 2 hours in the tree while this thing was just under the tree, intimidating them. So it had gotten out on nearby golf courses, terrorized golfers, that kind of a thing. In 2011, the 1.2-ton hippo was with its owner, Maurice, and we don't know exactly what happened, but it allegedly bit him and dragged him into the water, where he was bit multiple times, and his body was left submerged in the water. And it was discovered a time later. So I don't know how later it was discovered. It made it seem as though it was just an unknown period. So the paramedics responded to the scene to find the man had been bitten several times by the animal and had also been immersed in the river for an unknown period. He also one of the guys that was talking about the story said that the farmer was declared dead at the scene, but added it was not known for how long he had laid undiscovered. So I guess there's a little bit of mystery there. I mean, we don't know if the guy had died of a heart attack and then the thing pulled him into the water, or what happened exactly. But it seems that he was mauled by his hippo. Some of the stories circling around on social media say that the hippo ate him. Didn't eat him. It just bit him a little bit, but his body seemed to be mostly intact when they found him. So anyway, that's a pretty crazy story. I don't know that I'll be having any hippos anytime soon. Didn't Pablo Escobar buy a bunch of hippos and have them shipped down to Colombia, and now there's like a bunch of hippos in that area?
Yeah, I think they are considered an invasive species. I think they really took over and kind of wreaked a ton of havoc on the local area there.
I know that humans die unbelievably every year from hippos around the world because they're such dangerous animals.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was...
Be careful when you're around hippos, chimps, lions, tigers, and ferrets.
Yeah. Or any exotic animal that people... Well, first of all, I would say as a rule of thumb. First of all, do you know where that comes from? Rule of thumb? Apparently, there's a couple different ideas, but I have read this the other day. The rule of thumb is that if you see a nuclear explosion and you stick out your thumb, as far as you stick out your arm and hold your thumb up, if your thumb can cover the mushroom cloud of that nuclear explosion, you're far enough away to where you don't need to get any farther. That's kind of cool, right?
Did you ever see the Boondock Saints movie?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at the beginning of that, he says that the rule of thumb is if you were married, you could beat members of your family with a stick as long as it was thinner than the circumference of your thumb. That's what they say there, but I don't know what's true.
That's the Irish.
Lots of theories.
That's the Irish method, yeah. So I would say be careful of exotic animals that people claim are domesticated, but also animals are often a reflection of their owners. I mean, you can, like, pit bulls. Those dogs aren't inherently bad. It's just like the owners that are bad, and the owners that are neglectful that cause those dogs to lash out and hurt people.
The stereotypical owner, because there are probably plenty of pit bull owners that do a good job, but stereotypically they're not trained well, they're not cared for, they're not provided for.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about some of the good stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's switch it around, right? We talked about some of the bad things that can potentially come out. I want to talk about some of the good things. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is one of the things that animals can do that are very different to humans. And this is that there are several different animals that can be used to detect certain illnesses or sicknesses, or they can sense that something is happening in humans. So a couple examples, right? One of the first examples is dogs. Dogs have been used for years in their skills of detection, right? They can detect if if their owner is about to have a seizure, and they can sense that even before the person has the seizure, and they'll come over and sit down in somebody's lap and say, "You're about to have a seizure," and it gives somebody a little bit of forewarning to either lie down or whatever else. Dogs can detect breast cancer at an 88% of 88% positive detection rate.
Wow.
Of cases. They can detect lung cancer at a 99% accuracy.
Wow.
I don't know exactly how that's tested, but they can sense high or low blood sugar levels.
Well, they could just say all these people have lung cancer. Get 10 people in a room. 5 of them have lung cancer. 5 of them don't. And then
they can detect who does and who doesn't. Whether it's like, they'll sit next to the person who does or whatever else.
Yeah.
They can detect high and low blood sugar levels. They can detect diabetes, and just several other things that are very, very useful to know. And not only can they detect these things, but they can be trained in certain situations like the seizures to act and perform certain tasks when that comes, or when those attacks or whatever come on.
I heard that recently that there's some that can detect gluten in food. So people that are like highly sensitive to gluten intolerance.
Interesting.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Fruit flies. There have been an Italian study that found that fruit flies can detect certain cancer cells, and that they can differentiate between certain cancer cells. They specifically breast cancer. Mice have been able to they can identify the avian flu in other animals up to like a 90% accuracy. Pigeons have been known to, they can tell the difference between a malignant and a benign cancer cell. They, particularly when it comes to breast cancer, why is
it all these are breast cancer?
Well, I don't know.
What about prostate cancer?
Yeah, well, maybe breast cancer is closer to the surface.
Yeah, maybe so.
They said after even just one day of training of these pigeons, they can identify malignant cancer cells at a 50% accuracy. And then after 10 days of training, they can do it at an 85% accuracy.
Interesting.
Which they just must be able to sense or smell, or I don't know, something in just really interesting. The last one here is rats. Specifically the giant African pouched rat. It has been trained by humans to do several things, one of which is uncover buried landmines.
Oh, nice.
And also to detect tuberculosis. If there's tuberculosis in the air or an infection, tuberculosis infection in a specific town or whatever else, they can detect that at an 80% accuracy. So kind of interesting. Yeah, how some of these animals can be trained to sense and kind of save lives. Really interesting. And I think there's only more science that we can figure out about in situations like this.
Yeah, I think that us as humans, we are so dependent on technology that sometimes we don't know our own strengths. I read an article just yesterday about a lady whose husband got Parkinson's disease, and she said that she noticed that he started smelling differently a while before he was diagnosed, and he got diagnosed, and she's like, I think I can smell. And then when she went into the Parkinson's clinic, she noticed that everybody else smelled the same way. And so she literally did a study where they brought in like 10 people, and she identified, I think it was 8 out of the 10 that had Parkinson's. And the they're like, oh, well, you misclassified these two people. And she's like, okay. Then like a year later, those people came out as having Parkinson's.
Oh, jeez.
And so like she's trying to work with, scientists to figure out, what exactly she's smelling or how they can detect that. And so I think when you're really in tune with someone or you're in tune with your senses, I think humans could also do some great things, but often we dismiss that and we say, oh, animals are so intuitive or they have such great intuitions. But I think if we paid attention more, we might be able to tell those things too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's definitely true. I think a lot of it's just kind of training, and people have different abilities and their senses have different strengths.
So that's cool. A couple that I had thought of just off just some of the research I was doing is avalanche dogs. They're such a cool. Those are so cool. I was reading about one in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and how these dogs help find people and how they're trained. Just incredible, the history there. I mean, they've been used since I think the 1700s is what I read. There's dogs that so many stories about dogs saving their owners from fires, cats protecting their families from bears and mountain lions. There's lots of stories about dolphins protecting divers and lifeguards from sharks. One of the stories that I thought was cool that was kind of more mainstream, there was a dog named Conan. He was a Belgian Molinese. He was assigned to the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment, Delta, and he was given a medal and a plaque by President Trump for his heroic acts. In 2019, Conan the dog was credited with chasing Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi down a tunnel when they were, going after this. When the Special Forces team was going into this compound to get him. The dog chased him down a tunnel during the secret raid. This was the ISIS leader's compound. The dog was the only member of the Delta team that got injured after the mission. So he went down this tunnel chasing this guy, and the guy pulled a suicide vest and blew himself up, and the dog got injured in the tunnel. They thought he was done for. But they picked him up and they took him back. He actually recovered, made a full recovery, and is actually now back in action. When Trump presented the dog, he said, "This is some of the stuff he said." So he said, "Quote: So this is Conan, right now, probably the world's most famous dog. And then he called him a tough cookie, actually incredible, and the ultimate drug sniffer, the ultimate fighter." So kind of funny. He made a full recovery, and now he's back in service. So that was kind of a cool story about a dog that's being used to with our soldiers hand in hand. I mean, I've seen some of these special forces units like literally strap a dog across their chest and jump out of airplanes. I mean, pretty wild, pretty useful to have an animal like that with you I mean, you can't be running down a tunnel as fast as a dog can, So
yeah. No, I mean, they wouldn't do it if it wasn't useful.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I had another story here, which is kind of interesting. I had found several stories of, dolphins that have saved snorkelers from drowning, or a whale that protected some scuba diving scientists from some sharks that were in the area. And so this is kind of a story similar to that, but there was a man named Kevin Hines who had suffered for years from mental illness. And this mental illness, when he was 19 years old, led him to attempt to take his own life by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Astonishingly, when he jumped, when he hit the water, the impact of the water did not kill him, but he suffered several severe injuries, broken bones, a broken back from the fall and the impact with the water itself.
Jeez.
So once he was in the water, yet still alive and conscious, he was trying to stay afloat in the freezing water the best that he could, but couldn't keep his head above the water. until he felt a creature from in the water. And it really kind of scared him until he realized that this animal was, it kept bumping him so that he would kind of raise up and his head would come above the water. And then as he would start to kind of sink back down, he would bump him again and he would come back up and his head would come up out of the water. And it just kind of kept bumping him to keep his head out of the water. Although he didn't know what the animal was or what was going on at the time, he actually found out later by onlookers and people that were recording it and taking pictures that it was a sea lion that was kind of underneath him and that kept bumping him up just to kind of keep his head gently above the water until the rescue boats came out and were able to save him. And so
Cool.
I just kind of thought that was a really cool story about a completely wild animal
Yeah.
that saw someone or another creature in distress and decided to help.
Oh, yeah.
And so now this guy, Kevin Hines, he kind of travels the world educating people on mental health and suicide prevention and everything else. So really kind of a crazy story.
I mean, it's hard to not see like a divine intervention there, you know?
Oh, for sure.
So that's pretty cool. Let's before I share my last story, I have one more story that's really short, but it's very heartwarming. I think I want to end on that one. But let's tell the story about how an animal saved our grandfather's life, and we probably wouldn't be here today if it weren't for this animal.
Yep.
So maybe I'll just start to tell it, Ethan. If you think of any details that I'm leaving out, you can go ahead and jump in.
Yeah.
So our grandpa on our mom's side, he was when he was just a little guy, he was just barely scooching around, kind of a thing, not even able to really crawl yet, just able to scooch. His parents were doing some yard work, and they had laid out a towel, a big blanket on the front porch, and they had just put him on the blanket with a couple toys, and they were just doing some yard work in the garden, just right close by, maybe around the side of the house. And the way that the porch is that like the spindles on the porch, they didn't go all the way down to the base of the porch. There was like actually a little gap there, so you could sweep off the porch real easy. And anyway, so my great grandparents are doing stuff in the garden or whatever. Then they come, let's go check on AJ. So they go around and they see that the little baby, our grandpa, had kind of scooted his way, and his legs went over the porch, went under that little like 2x4
Gap.
the gap between the 2x4 and the porch. His body went through that, but his head was too big to fit through that. But his body was hanging off the porch, and his head was stuck. So they don't know how long he had been like that. But luckily, they had an old sow, an old pig that was theirs, and it had walked up and stood right under him so that he was able to kind of stand on it or take some pressure off of his neck so he didn't basically strangle or hang himself off this porch. And so they found that pig holding him up so that he stayed alive. So anything you'd add to that, Ethan?
Yeah, no, that was a good description of the story, and that's how I've heard it. And I just thought it was kind of crazy how, I mean, kids can get into anything. They'll just wiggle through any little crack that they can, and he was almost just dangling there by his head and his neck hanging off the porch. And this pig, I don't know if it knew what it was doing or not. I like to think that maybe it was, or like you said earlier, Jared, divine intervention. This pig just decided to stand under and support his body, take the weight off of his neck and head until
Mom and Dad
the
could arrive.
parents came around. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Story.
I think that pig had a Brothers Creed podcast in mind.
Yeah.
No, just
seriously.
imagine there's generational impacts of just that one animal intervention. So it's pretty cool. And I think that they're,
I'd have a hard time eating that pig, but
yeah, exactly. I just let that one die of old age.
yeah.
So the last story Ethan, do you have any other stories?
Nope, that's it.
So the last story I had, this one is just so heartwarming for me. I just read this and I was just like, this is too cute not to share. So there was a boy named Real Gunjan. He was in Ontario, Canada, and he was out camping on a trip with his parents. And his parents decided to go fishing just in a boat right in like a river right in front of him. And he stayed on shore to just was hanging out in camp, basically. And he was a young guy. And he apparently witnessed his parents' boat tipping over, and unfortunately, both of his parents drowned. And so he was all alone in the woods. Panic-stricken, he just kind of attempted to walk to the nearest town, but it started getting dark out, and he realized that he would have to spend the night outside. So he just laid down on the ground, basically traumatized from this whole ordeal, and then he felt a warm, furry body press up against him. Thinking it was like a dog, he just fell asleep. He woke up the next morning and he found 3 wild beavers had come up and snuggled up against him, and they had saved him from freezing to death overnight because the temperatures dipped below 0. So,
Beavers.
3 beavers came up and snuggled up next to him and saved his life. Isn't that crazy? It's wild, man.
Yeah.
3 little beavers, the warm beaver pelts just laying right on this little boy, protecting him. But mom and dad were watching out for him somewhere. They were calling any favor they could from the big man to help protect their son. So I thought that was a very heartwarming story. Just, again, wild animals helping other creatures in need. So very cool. It's so cool how animals can be so good. And I mean, you've got to be careful because they can go wrong, but they can also be so good. And so this is very interesting topic. And I think it's just, there's so many people that have had different experiences, positive and negative, with different animals. So,
I mean, we coexist with animals on this planet. We always have. And I mean, they're here for a reason, and we're here for a reason, and we're meant to coexist. And so I think just there is beauty in the things that animals can do, in anything from being able to sense or detect things to the strength and the power that they have. But like you said, it's a matter of being, trust but verify, right?
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing with people, right?
Yep.
There are people that are capable of great things, but there are also people that are capable of
atrocities,
very, very bad things.
Yeah.
And, you could talk about the difference between, maybe if a person does something bad, it's more malicious in nature and character. When an animal does something bad, maybe it's more instinctual, survival based. But this has been a really cool episode for us to kind of talk about some of these stories.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us, everybody. We appreciate you joining us, and also and exploring these new topics and learning about the different sliding scale of animals and how to appreciate them and respect them for the power that they have. So thanks, everybody, and let's build that creed together.
All right, let's do it.